We note that the session is being recorded and that there is simultaneous translation, which can be accessed using the instructions on the screen. We also note that muting original audio is optional for you guys. We invite everyone connected to Zoom to share their name, organization, and country represented in the chat. We have just about 30 minutes for today's presentation. And I ask that while the presenters are making their presentation, that any questions or comments are placed in the chat box for those connected via Zoom. And we are also streaming live via Marfon's Facebook page. And so I ask that for persons who are joining us via Facebook, that they please feel free to post their comments and questions. Before we move into today's presentation, I would like to take a few minutes to introduce our speakers for today. Carlito Turner. Carlito supports EDF's global work on small-scale fisheries with a focus on training and capacity building. By supporting small-scale fisheries and developing trainings, tools, and resources, Carlito empowers fishery stakeholders to diagnose fishery challenges and develop lasting solutions, resulting in the sustainable use of marine resources and improved livelihoods. Nicar Kenya. Nick, as he is known to all of us, has led EDF's Sustainable Fisheries Initiative work in the Belize for the past decade, with a focus on local capacity building, adaptive management programs, community outreach, and policy support through collaborations with the Belize Fisheries Department and MPA staff and co-managers. Work that has emphasized the implementation of fisheries management tools that improve resource managers and users' capacity to strengthen the resilience of marine resources, which supports local livelihoods. Carlito and Nick, thank you both so much for being here with us today. I pass the floor to you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Wonderful. All right. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Yes. So wonderful. So thank you, Angie, for the wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. On behalf of my colleague, Nick, we'd like to thank you all for joining and to Marfun for inviting us here today. We're excited to speak with you about the Small Scale Fisheries Resource and Collaboration Hub, or SSF Hub, as well as how the SSF Hub is being used to support science-based fisheries management in Belize and beyond. So small-scale fisheries are critical to jobs, culture, and the food security of coastal communities around the world. The term small-scale fishery is difficult to define. Generally speaking, they're small boats, owner-operated, often harvesting through day trips, where harvests are consumed for local markets. When we talk about small-scale fisheries, we're also talking about pre- and post-harvest activities. So things like gear preparations and processing and selling. But functionally, the characteristics of small-scale fisheries and what is considered a small-scale fishery varies widely around the world. And so what's considered a small-scale fishery in one country may be considered a large-scale fishery in another country. However, what is clear is that small-scale fisheries Despite the critical role that small-scale fisheries play in securing the livelihoods, nutrition, and well-being for millions of people, Historically, their contributions are often overlooked, lack information and formal recognition in many places, and therefore they're oftentimes poorly understood. However, recent research has helped shed light on small-scale fisheries contributions, and the figures are staggering. They account for 40% of global fisheries catch, 90% of the people working in capture fisheries work in small-scale fisheries. Globally, nearly 500 million people depend on small-scale fisheries for their livelihoods, and 40% of the people working in small-scale fisheries are women. Lastly, their harvests are critical to food security and meeting the nutritional needs of coastal communities around the world. Despite the recent figures above, small-scale fisheries have been historically overlooked. As a result, they don't receive the same resources or attention compared to other sectors, and this makes securing their sustainability and future challenging. So there's a need to overcome these challenges to ensure that small-scale fisheries can continue to provide these benefits that they already do long into the future. Fortunately, today there's growing momentum towards recognizing the contributions of small-scale fisheries. In 2014, the United Nations adopted the voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries in the context of food security and poverty eradication, or simply put, the SSF Guidelines. The guidelines were developed by small-scale fishers and fish workers and many other contributors from government and civil society. And they're the first international instrument dedicated entirely to the small-scale fisheries sector. The guidelines support responsible fishing and sustainable and social economic development for the benefit of current and future generations. And the guidelines provide consensus principles on addressing small-scale fisheries. They can be used to guide dialogue and policy processes and actions at all levels, international, national, regional, and local, to help the sector realize its full potential to contribute to food security and poverty eradication. So the vision for the future of small-scale fisheries has been captured in the guidelines, and work in many countries is already well underway to implement these guidelines, yet there remains a need to scale and accelerate solutions. So on the screen now, you'll see some of the sections of the guidelines, and as you can see, they cover a range of topics and issues. The guidelines also encourage governments and civil society to take action to improve small-scale fisheries. So to support the implementation of the guidelines, a group of organizations working in and with small-scale fisheries developed the Small-Scale Fisheries Hub, or SSF Hub. The hub creates an opportunity to inspire and empower people to elevate the profile of small-scale fisheries, to learn and share information, and enhance the capacity for all small-scale fisheries stakeholders. The hub was released in January of 2021 with a range of partner organizations and supporters. And since then, we've grown collaborating with a range of organizations active in small-scale fisheries around the world. And EDF is acting as the secretariat of the hub. So the objectives of the hub are to share knowledge, tools, resources, and processes, to connect people living and working in small-scale fisheries and provide a space to share stories and learnings, and to strengthen partnerships and collaboration with people and organizations working in and with small-scale fisheries. We set out to achieve these objectives through three interconnected work streams, what we call the platform, the community, and initiatives. And so the hub strategies and day-to-day work are centered around advancing these three work streams. So the first work stream is platform. And the platform really seeks to answer the question, how can we ensure that everyone has access to knowledge and tools that they need to implement the guidelines? When we were initially developing the hub, one of the gaps that was identified was that there wasn't a single place where small-scale fishery actors could find tools and resources. An individual organization might have some tools available on their website and available to the public, but oftentimes not. And many smaller community-based organizations and people working in small-scale fisheries may not have the time or the resources to share the solutions that they've developed and implemented. So we knew that a platform or website would be a key component of the SSF Hub's work. We began creating the website in 2020 by holding dozens of interviews with small-scale fisheries actors and listening to their priorities on what they would like to see in a platform. We then built the site over a 15-month iterative process, continually adapting the site as it developed. And even after the website and the platform has been launched, it's been redesigned and we've adapted it based on feedback. The site uses automated translation in about 26 languages that are prevalent in small-scale fisheries. So on the Hub website, you'll find a resource library where you can find capacity building resources, including case studies, online courses, videos, and manuals on topics relevant to small-scale fisheries. And all of the resources on the site are free. The resource library currently contains about 280 resources relating to small-scale fisheries that are from 68 different countries and 40 different languages. You can search resources and filter them based on language, topic, country, region, and the type of resource. And if you know of resources that would be helpful to others living and working in small-scale fisheries, you can submit them to the Hub so other people can learn about them. So we know that having resources alone on the platform is not enough to catalyze action. The second Hub work stream is community, which seeks to connect people living and working in small-scale fisheries to share stories and learnings. So we wanted to create a space for community leaders, fishers, and the people that work with them, including NGOs and government, to discuss and learn from each other. For example, how can we take steps to support small-scale fisheries? How are people using tools and resources to the benefit of small-scale fisheries and to help them realize the small-scale fisheries guidelines? And what has worked well and what hasn't? So concretely, as the SSF Hub, we are publishing stories about people and organizations working in small-scale fisheries that we call highlights. On the platform, we've created a space for topical, geographic, and species-based groups, particularly to explore and discuss resources on the site. We host webinars and conversations working directly with small-scale fisheries leaders and representatives to provide spaces for people to share their vision, their needs, and their priorities. And then we developed a Facebook group where people can post informal content and videos. And then we also try and host fun events like photo contests that share and celebrate the traditions and cultures active in small-scale fisheries. So one of the community building aspects is what we call the community forum on the site. And it's a place to help people build connections and exchange ideas and learnings with the global community. You can share information, you can offer your own experience, or you can answer questions posed by others. And a feature of this community forum are groups. And so groups are places to coordinate and problem solve around a specific theme. The Hub has topic-based groups such as ICT for small-scale fisheries, that's focused on technology in small-scale fisheries. And it also has geographic and species-based groups, such as the Global Octopus Network and a Costa Rican youth fishing group, as well as a Caribbean small-scale fisheries group. Anyone can start and moderate a group on the SSF Hub. You just have to reach out to administrators such as myself, and we'd be happy to provide you with the credentials to be able to start and moderate a group. The Hub also has a dedicated events section where you can find out information on upcoming small-scale fisheries related web-based and in-person events. And then a final area of the Hub community is the member directory. So you can browse the profiles of SSF Hub members and better understand who's working on issues similar to yourself. And then you can reach out to those experts. You can reach out to those experts on the Hub or via email. The Hub also hosts webinars to bring attention to important topics in small-scale fisheries. So, for example, in 2021, the Hub hosted a two-part series featuring the voices and perspectives of fishers. Part one focused on the experiences and responses to the global pandemic, and part two focused on how fishers and other value chain actors have innovated to overcome the COVID crisis. These virtual events replicated some of the features of an in-person fisher-to-fisher exchange and provided a space for fishers and fish workers to share their stories and share about challenges brought on by COVID and how in many cases they've been able to overcome them. And then, as I mentioned recently, after receiving feedback from Small-Scale Fishery Hub users, we also heard that people wanted an informal space where they could share. And so we set up a Facebook group just a few weeks ago. The Facebook group is a more personal way to connect with people. And it's a place where people can share what's on their minds, share pictures and videos from their communities, share their catch of the day, and share more about their culture and traditions. So it's been a fun space, and since we just started the Facebook group, we're also kind of learning how people want to use it, and we'd encourage you to go to the page and check out some of the posts and post yourself. And so the final and third work stream of the Hub is what we call initiatives. And so this work stream is dedicated to strengthening partnerships and collaboration with people and organizations working in and with small-scale fisheries. So through the Hub's initiatives, we seek to answer the question, what can we do together to directly take action? A key strategy has been to create opportunities for dialogue and for small-scale fishery actors to directly participate and actively engage with national, regional, and international events. So the United Nations, as many of you are aware, the United Nations declared 2022 the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture, or IAFA, to help focus the world's attention on small-scale fisheries. Specifically, to focus the world's attention on the role that small-scale fisheries play in food security and nutrition, poverty eradication, and sustainable resource use, and thereby increasing global understanding and action to support them, and to also enhance dialogue to support small-scale fishery producers and make their voices heard. And so for IAFA, which continues through next month, the Hub has developed a global campaign to elevate the voices of fishers through hosting a new series of thematic webinars tied to IAFA's themes, to hosting Fisher Voices videos where you can learn directly from the fishers on their perspectives and priorities, and by supporting in-person local dialogues where groups of people have a chance to discuss these priority issues in their communities and what actions they would like to take together. So these events will help exchange stories, best practices, and actions needed to protect the lives and livelihoods of small-scale fishers worldwide. And the campaign will highlight important topics voiced by small-scale fishers and fish workers to build increased awareness about issues facing small-scale fishing communities and drive action to support them. Actually, the next webinar in this series is going to start 30 minutes after this current webinar that we're on. So we invite you all to join, and we'll be co-hosting the webinar with the Ibero-American Network for Small-Scale Artisanal Fishing, or RIPAPE. And the topic is on governance, and you can see that there will be translation, and some of the speakers that we're working with are listed on the screen. So it'll be another opportunity to hear from the point of view of the fishing sector on the possibilities and challenges in the future, the vision for the future to improve governance in the artisanal fishing sector. Finally, as a part of our initiatives workstream, we're also working with small-scale fisheries actors to ensure their participation at international events where small-scale fisheries are often underrepresented. So for example, we have sponsored or secured the participation of youth fishers from Latin America and the Caribbean, Asia, and Africa at regional and international events, such as COFI and the United Nations Ocean Conference. It's really important for small-scale fishery voices to be present at these events because decisions are made at these events that directly affect them, and their participation can help ensure that they're able to advocate directly for their priorities. So for example, this past June, the Hub co-organized a summit prior to the 35th session of the FAO's Committee on Fisheries, or COFI, with the participation of 140 people from 41 countries, most of them small-scale fisheries representatives. At this summit, it was organized to promote dialogue among small-scale fishers and fish workers and provide an opportunity to network, identify their priorities, and articulate a collective voice. And then the summit was opened up to key partners and decision makers, and they shared these learnings that they were able to discuss in the first days of the summit with this group, and then later on at COFI, which was immediately following the summit. And so this 2022 summit prepared the ground for a regular platform for small-scale fisheries communities to exchange, discuss, and collectively act to advance the implementation of the guidelines. And due to the success of the summit, plans are underway to convene a summit every 2 years prior to COFI to ensure continued support for the small-scale fisheries sector and the implementation of the guidelines, which will have their 10th anniversary in 2024 at the next COFI. So what's next for the Hub? We want to make sure that the attention and visibility that was raised during IAFA continues to grow into a new era of support for small-scale fisheries. So the Hub and its partners and community will continue to do this through engaging in webinars and other activities to ensure that the vision and voices of small-scale fisheries are heard. By planning the next Small-Scale Fisheries Summit in 2024 alongside SSF actors, so their needs are met through an event like COFI, and their vision is taken to COFI. And then to support smaller local organizations in their work in communities to help them share their stories and to help them implement the guidelines. So this, we're responding to the needs that we've heard. One priority that we've heard for the next year would be establishing topic-based, what we call portals on the Hub. And one of the areas of interest that we've heard is how can small-scale fisheries access financing? So that's something that we're hoping to work on this year. And we'd love for you all here to get involved with the Small-Scale Fisheries Hub. I've seen the participant list, and as I look over to it, I know that there are many, many people on these calls that have made huge impacts in their communities and beyond. And we'd love it if you're able to share your stories on the Hub and what you've learned from others, or what you've learned with others, so we can all benefit. So share your stories and experience implementing sustainable fisheries, and join the Facebook group and post there. And then we also invite people to start or join a group if there's a topic that you're particularly interested on working in or passionate about. We'd invite you to start a group on the Hub and invite others to join. And then lastly, we're always looking for feedback. So if you have feedback on the Hub's platform, community, or initiatives, or know of ways that we can support the small-scale fisheries where you work, please reach out to us, and my email will be later on, and you can also use the Hub's contact form to reach our team. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Nick, to talk about his experience with fisheries management and capacity building in Belize.
Thank you very much, Carlito. Thanks for sharing the details of the SSF Hub. I'll delve a little bit deeper into what was done in Belize. And so just to give a bit of context, with the impacts of crises like COVID-19 that has affected Belize and essentially globally, and climate change on coastal communities, it continues to test our collective resilience of fisheries management and what we do together as stakeholders of these fisheries. And so with the generous support of the Belize Marine Fund, EDF, the Belize Fisheries Department, co-managers, several of which are present this morning, and partners collaborated to strengthen the capacity of the managed access committees. These are committees for each of the fishing areas in Belize under the managed access program. And so by investing in the local leadership of these managed access committees and connecting the managed access committees with partners and international expertise through the Small Scale Fisheries Hub and the trainings that we've been doing in Belize, it really has highlighted an important platform that the managed access committees really play in the management of fisheries in Belize. And so what we did with the trainings were, first, we did individual trainings with each of the managed access committees across the country. And after, we did a national managed access committee workshop, which was over a couple of days in Belize City. Next slide, please. And so these, as I mentioned earlier, the managed access committees are an important platform that supports a number of national initiatives in Belize. These include support for replenishment zones, the improvement of the multi-species finfish management plan that has been developed and now approved, and in some instances starting to be implemented in Belize, as well as recreational fisheries and climate resilience, resilient fisheries management, which is essential in terms of its support for livelihoods and community stewardship in Belize. And so one of the things that I want to highlight is that through the training, there were sessions held for each of these thematic areas, climate resilience, replenishment zones, multi-species finfish management, and recreational fishing, as well as the small-scale fisheries hub. And as a result of these trainings and the national workshop that was held, one of the key results coming out of these of this capacity building was the development of an action plan for the managed access committees. Some of the activities within the action plan are now starting to be implemented, such as the radio show that is being supported by WCS, the Fisheries Department, and other partners. And so really the idea with this project was to strengthen the managed access committees and for them to continue to be that important pillar, that important platform for all these national initiatives that Belize continues to work on as part of its overall fisheries management in country. And so I just want to take the opportunity here to thank the Fisheries Department and co-managers that were integral in the capacity building activities that happen for each of the managed access areas. And so with that, and cognizant of the time limitation, I want to extend our gratitude to the Belize Marine Fund for the support that it provided for this work to be done. And here are our contacts, both my email and Carlito's email, and we look forward to opening up the session for any questions, feedback that you may have. Thank you. Thanks, Carlito.
Thank you again, Carlito and Nick, for that presentation. As you mentioned, Nick, we now open the floor for questions, any questions that we might have. I know colleagues have been fielding questions from Facebook, so if there's anything there, please let us know. I don't believe I've seen any questions in the chat box, but there is a comment, I believe. And it is from Mr. Andrew Castillo. I will read here what he has shared. I hope that there are continued efforts to give small-scale fishers an opportunity to visit/host other fishers from different countries. These exchanges are valuable. Nick?
I'd like to just endorse that feedback, that comment that Andrew shared. Thank you very much, Andrew. We recognize that one of the important things that have happened in the past has really been those learning exchanges. And we've been fortunate to have been participating along with the Belize Fisheries Department and several co-managers in Belize on several exchanges, both within Central America, Caribbean, and in the past, we've had exchanges from Indonesia and the Philippines, as well as Cuba. And so, yes, that is an important activity, something that can only be done when we have these exchanges. I think that what we've recognized, what we've learned from these exchanges is that there's a lot more that happens both within the formal and informal setting of these exchanges. And we want to thank partners like SEA that have hosted these exchanges in the past, and we look forward to exploring opportunities to continue such exchanges.
Thanks for that, Nick. I'm seeing something else here from Jimmy Andino. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It says, hello, how officially the managed access committees are recognized by government, how the communities are engaged actively in the committees, how they participate or decision-making. Thanks. I guess how they participate for decision-making.
Thank you. Jimmy, to respond to that, the managed access committees really started in the context of the piloting of managed access at Glover's Reef and Port Honduras Marine Reserves. And this was a specific recommendation from fishers. And so when that piloting phase moved on to the national expansion, there were elections within each of the fishing communities that fish within these fishing areas to elect their fisher representatives to these committees. There's been a lot that has happened since the national expansion. The goal being really to continue to support this important platform, because as you recognize from the presentation I made, it's not only managed access related initiatives that the managed access committees support. They support replenishment zone expansion. They've been integral to the passage of the Fisheries Resources Act and other national initiatives. And so the Fisheries Department and partners continue to really better understand what that role of the Managed Access Committee will evolve into. In the past, they've been integral in terms of making recommendations to the Fisheries Department as to who gets licenses to fish within these fishing areas. Belize has essentially zoned off its territorial waters into these fishing areas. One of the specific recommendations coming out of the past trainings under this project supported by the Belize Marine Fund was really getting feedback from managed access committees as to where they see their role evolving into. One of the things that have come out of those discussions, those trainings, has been the recommendation of managed access committees to have a representative of the managed access committees in the recently established Fisheries Council. This Fisheries Council was established under the Fisheries Resources Act. And so it is the council, the highest council that advises the minister on all fisheries related decisions in the country. And so the Fisheries Department will continue to work with the committees and partners to ensure that there is representation at that highest level. I'm not sure if that responded to your question, Jimmy, but I can expand on other things if you so desire.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And nice to see you.
Thanks.
I see the floor has been opened for speaking. And so I see that Mr. Nigel Martinez has had his hands up for a while now. And so I invite you, Nigel, to have the floor. And I think there are others that also have questions. So we just need to be mindful of the time that we have. Nigel?
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having me. Good morning to the panel. Good morning, Nick and Carlito. I have a quick question. Carlito, this one is for you. I have two for you and one for Nick, if that is fine. You mentioned in your presentation that small scale fishers don't receive the same amount of resources, and that is very, very true. And I wanted to find out from you if you can walk us through if there is any mechanism to address this, if you guys have any plans in the future, how you guys are going to make it a fair playing field. That's one. The second question relates to the guidelines. I am not aware, and maybe you can correct me, both you or Nick, if Belize has signed on to the small scale fishers guideline. I think that the guideline has been implemented for a specific reason. You have stated it here explicitly, and I can't understand why is it that we have not signed on it. We have not signed on it. And then my last question is as it relates to the multi-species management plan. Nick, I know that in your presentation you have indicated that we have begun some form of implementation. I'm just wondering if you can just expand on that a little, which component of the multi-species management plan we have started to implement, just so that we can get a clear view as to where we are in terms of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Nigel. Sorry, Carlito, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just going to thank Nigel as well for your questions. I'm going to try and handle the first two here. And so in terms of access to resources for small scale fisheries, I think, and I alluded to it towards the end of my presentation, but what we're hoping to do with the hub this year, based on what we've heard from small scale fisheries actors, is to try and identify where small scale fishers or small scale fishing organizations can go to access financial resources. And so this is really a priority that we've heard and that we'd like to see the hub take on and help with, and provide one place where everyone can find more information about this. And then I think aside from financial resources, then there are capacity building resources. And so that's something that the hub currently has, and we're really looking for people on this call and people that have been closely working with small scale fisheries to help provide these stories and these examples to others around the world. I think the idea of fisheries exchanges was mentioned, and that I know we think those are all so impactful, and we hope to be able to host in virtual exchanges because of the difficulty of international travel and how dispersed small scale fisheries are. So I think there are other types of resources, like human resources that we're all aware of and that we'd like to make sure are shared on the hub. And then, so to the second question about signing on to the guidelines, I'm not certain about Belize. I think that my understanding is, states are really still trying to understand how to implement the guidelines, and this is something that's still in process. I know that what's called the IPC Secretariat, so the International Planning Committee, I believe, they're authoring a report on national implementation of the guidelines. And I don't think that has been published yet, but that's something I think to look forward to in the future, to see how Belize and other countries are implementing the guidelines and with what success. And so I think hopefully that answers the first two of your questions, and I'll pass it over to Nick for the third.
Thanks, Carlito. So just wanted to make an additional comment here regarding the managed access committees, and that is that the managed access committees act in an advisory capacity, and so that's important to note here. And so trying to move towards seeing, what their role within the Fisheries Advisory Council will evolve into is an important next step. In terms of the multi-species finfish management plan, Nigel, there are several components that the plan speak to. One of those that the Fisheries Department and other partners have been working on has been related to the aspect of the continued monitoring and management and protection of the spawning aggregations in Belize. And so specifically in the case of TASA at Turnef, there continues to be an active role there in ensuring that these sites are monitored and that there is a better understanding of what is happening in terms of the status of the fish spawning aggregations at Turnef. One of the key things that all of us can relate to is that we can't be speaking to finfish management if there isn't adequate protection management of these spawning aggregations, which really are sources of seed for multiple species of finfish.
Thank you, Nick and Carlito. I think I see two more questions here in the chat. I think the first is from Ivy, and then there's another from Alex. And so I'll read through Ivy's question comment first, and once we've dealt with that, then I can go down to Alex's. So it says, this is a good opportunity to mention that the Latin America and Caribbean Fisheries Congress will be in Mexico this May. This is a great place to present some of the work done with SSF in the region. And I would encourage organizations to sponsor fishers to attend as well. And the link to that Congress, I believe, is there in the chat as well. So Ivy, thank you for that comment. I don't know if any of you guys would like to add anything to that, Carlito or Nick.
Thank you for calling attention to that, Ivy. I wasn't aware of that, so I appreciate it.
Okay, so I'll move on now to what Alex has shared with us. It says, can the action plan developed for these communities be shared? What are factors that assist in determining the number of fishers in these managed access areas? For example, for Turnef designated in 2012, there was a little more than 250 licensed fishers licensed for Turnef. Now, there are approximately 1,200 licenses issued for Turnef. Sorry, there's a bit more which I'm trying to see. Sorry, I'm not seeing it. Okay. Please bear with me. I need to scroll down so I ensure that I read Alex's submission in its entirety. Okay, so it says that Turnef, for example, for Turnef, when we got the Marine Reserve designated in 2012, there were a little more than 250 licensed fishers for Turnef. Now there are approximately 1,200 licenses issued for Turnef. That is a significant increase since 2012. So again, sorry, go ahead, Nick.
Sorry, go ahead, Anjali.
I was going to try and repeat it. Can the action plan developed for these communities be shared? What are the factors that assist in determining the number of fishers in these managed access areas? For example, for Turnef, when we got the Marine Reserve designated in 2012, there were a little more than 250 licensed fishers for Turnef. Now there are approximately 1,000 200 licensed fishers, which is a significant increase since the designation in 2002.
Okay,
Sorry.
first of all, in terms of the sharing of the action plan, I am certain that follow-up can be done with the partner organizations, the co-managers, and the fisheries department as well. But in terms of the numbers, I don't know, Alex, that those numbers are correct or not. What I would like to say is that essentially what has happened is that we've moved to a managed access system, and there was vetting when fishers were settling into their areas, and now fishers must continue to abide by the conditions of their licenses. But there isn't any cap on the number of licenses within the fishing areas as yet. Really, what was the ultimate goal was to create better stewardship and to encourage fishers to be more participatory in the management of their areas. And so I really think that has really been the focus of the program. And in terms of the numbers specific to Turnef, I am not sure that those numbers that you're quoted are true. And so, for example, back then, if I'm thinking about the numbers that you shared, and I'm not seeing the actual comment, technically back then, it could be that that number was the number of fishers that could have accessed Turnef. Now only those fishers that are licensed for the areas can have access to Turnef or any of the other fishing areas.
Thanks, Nick. I don't see any other questions. I don't know if there's any. Go ahead, Nick.
Angeline, I just wanted to share, I know that Nigel had asked about the guidelines. And so I know that through the work of the Fisheries Department and other partners that Belize has been implementing some of those sustainable fisheries guidelines in various projects, through the managed access program, the management plans for conch, lobster, and multi-species finfish, and of course the updating of the Fisheries Resources Act. You know that the act was updated in 2020, and of course there are a number of other initiatives nationally, including the initiation of the updating of the fisheries regulations, which is meant to happen this year and led by the Fisheries Department and other partners. And of course, the development of fisheries policy strategy and action plan. That is something that Belize has done, as well as the development of a mariculture policy. This, of course, is something that the Nature Conservancy and others are helping to develop specifically for mariculture. And so all of this really aims to improve governance, as well as the development of a co-management framework and agreement for the marine protected areas in Belize, inland reserves, and fishing priority areas. These are all initiatives led by the Belize Fisheries Department, along with other partners, as I had mentioned earlier in the case of the mariculture with TNC. The co-managers, of course, of each of these marine protected areas playing an integral role in the implementation of these.
Thank you, Nick. I think I just saw something additional here from Mr. Castillo. Okay, it says, I wear different hats, and I would refer to the number of fishers that are stated here. There is nothing to suggest that this is not true. There should be transparency to the fisher organizations, associations, if they are to effectively help manage these resources. And so I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that. Go ahead.
I'd just like to say that I don't know the specifics of what Mr. Castillo is referring to, but I agree that the continued dialogue and open communication across all stakeholders is an important aspect of sustainable fisheries management in the long term.
Okay, and then I have from Alex Anderson, thanks Nick. Going forward, will a cap on the managed access areas be considered by these committees?
I don't know that the committees will actually determine that. As I said earlier, it is important that we understand that the committees act in an advisory capacity. Ultimately, the Fisheries Department and partners such as TASA in the case of TURNEF and the committees will have to continue that dialogue, will have to continue that work of understanding what that will evolve into. And I don't know that I have that that answer right now. One of the good things about managed access is that it is an adaptive process. And so as we continue to work collectively on improving fisheries management, these are decisions that we'll have to together with all stakeholders be considered.
Thanks, Nick. Mr. Andrew Castillo.
Just to say, Angeline, sorry, that it is important that we have participation of all partners, fishers, the associations, cooperatives, community leaders in the decision-making process. And so wherever there is opportunity for either trainings, workshop, it is important that we continue to advocate and promote full participation of all stakeholders to be able to come up with these decisions. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. From Mr. Castillo, a follow-up comment. It states, it also has to be noted that we have incursions from foreign intruders who are ravaging our resources.
Yes, Mr. Castillo, that continues to be an issue. Yes, we collectively would like to see more enforcement. We'd like to see more efforts geared towards preventing or lessening that incursion that is occurring, particularly in the southern part of our country. It continues to be a challenge. I know that there are several partners and the Fisheries Department that continue to work on some technological innovative approaches to try to see how that could be addressed.
Thanks, Nick. I have something here from Ellie Ellis. My apologies if I did not pronounce that correctly. Ellie states, do these managed access committees have an online presence outside of the hub?
Currently, there isn't one, and as I said earlier, the role of the managed access committees continue to evolve, and so as that evolves, I think it is important that the Fisheries Department, co-managers and other partners continue to see what that presence will be like and how that could be supported for the managed access committees.
Thanks, Nick. And then I have a final question here from Mr. Castillo, Mr. Andrew Castillo. Okay, and a follow-up that just came in. Do the participants here get a summary of the webinar? And then he continues, thank you all, and I have been missing out, not attending these webinars. Thanks again, and I will, when time permits, make a point to be a part of this dialogue. Stay safe, everyone. So just to, thanks, Nick. Just to answer Mr. Castillo, all the webinars, and maybe I should allow my colleague Lucy to take this one. Lucy?
Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you for having joined us. In a few days, we are going to share by MailChimp the link to this recording. And also we will appreciate that you can answer a short survey that we are going to share with you. I will share the links to the English and the Spanish survey. Thank you.
Yes, and also Lucy, if I'm correct, I believe there's a space within the website, the Marfon website, where all the webinars so far, the recordings can be found, correct? And I think the presentation.
Yes, I will share right now the link to that page.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. So yes, Mr. Castillo, this information is available to participants after today's session. And there's also an opportunity, because you said you're missing out. So there's an opportunity for you to go back and listen to previous webinar sessions. I have something here from Jen Chapman. My apologies, Jen. It says a major benefit of managed access as initially planned, was for fishers to hold a role in enforcement. However, with MAA committees occupying an advisory role, their agency is limited. Is there an opportunity here for increasing agency of MAA committees, fishers, and addressing fishing incursions? Nick and Carlito, did you guys get that, or should I read it again?
No, I got it, Angeline. I got it. Jen, thank you very much for participating. Thanks for the feedback. To respond to your question, I'd say not really. I don't understand that is the role of the managed access committees, but as I said earlier, the role of the managed access committees continue to evolve. And so I'd say really, I don't think that is the role. That was actually what was proposed for the committees. But again, collectively, I think these discussions will need to continue, and the participation of partners, fishers, and community leaders is going to be important moving forward as that role evolves.
Thanks, Nick. Jen also says, thank you all for the great and informative presentations and questions. And then Carlito is thanking everyone for joining. If you'd like to follow up with Nick or Carlito, please feel free to email them, and their email is in the chat. Carlito has shared it in the chat, and I believe it was also shared in the presentation. Lucy has shared the links to the survey that we have for you guys today. Mr. Andrew Castillo says thanks again to all. Thank you all. And Lucy has also shared with us the recordings for the previous webinars in both Spanish and English here. I don't see any other questions or comments here in the Zoom chat. Lucy, I don't know if there's anything on Facebook. Nick, please go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to say, I know that the issue of enforcement came up several times in our discussions earlier, and certainly by Jen and Andrew. I just want to say that the work of the Belize Fisheries Department, co-managers and partners, continues to be a multi-stakeholder collaboration aimed at addressing those enforcement issues. And so I'd just like to make the point that it requires that collectively we continue to remain engaged, we continue to participate, and to provide feedback and input in the various processes that either the co-managers specific to those fishing areas, or the Fisheries Department more in its national mandate of fisheries management in Belize continue to develop. And so I'd encourage everyone, particularly those stakeholders in Belize, to remain and continue to remain engaged in this process, particularly around the issue of enforcement, which is a multi-stakeholder collaboration that is required.
Thank you, Nick. We're just a bit after 11, being respectful of everyone's time. I see Nigel's hand up. Nigel, you had something else you wanted to share?
Yes, I just wanted to thank Nick and Carlito for the great presentation and for taking our questions. And I just wanted to finalize my questions and go back to the multi-species management plan. Nick, if you can kindly indicate whether or not the department is looking at a phased approach to the multi-species management plan, or is there any other mechanism as to how they plan on rolling this out?
Nigel, to respond to your question, the development of the multi-species finfish management plan has really been collective. It has been participatory. It has really been the collective effort of all our stakeholders, including the federation, associations, cooperatives, fishers, fisher leaders. And similarly, in terms of the implementation, it will require our collective efforts to be able to implement these. And so I think that realistically, it is important for us to understand that the department alone will not be able to implement all the components of the management plan. And so my understanding is that there is going to be a phased approach to it. Like I said, there are some partners that are already starting some work. The collection and of catch data, among other things, is something that has initiated. But really, I see all of this to make the point that it will require a collective effort on the part of all stakeholders, fishers and fisher organizations being an integral part of this. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Nick. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I don't know if there's anything from Facebook Live, Lucy. If there isn't, then I think we have come to the end of our webinar session for today. We'd like to thank you all for the participation, your presence, your discourse. Thank you. I think it was a very productive session. And I invite you again, as Lucy did, to please fill the survey that was provided in the chat, and join us again for another series in our webinars. I'm sure you'll be hearing from our communication team regarding the next in the lineup. And again, thank you and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.